A retired editor friend of mine from my days at BJU Press, a grandmother, the mother of one of my sister's friends in high school as it happens, likes to send me occasional Bible questions. She sent one the other day about the alleged secret meaning of God's name. She said, "Hey Mark, I've seen this circulating on social media and I wonder if this is how Hebrew works." Of course, my ears perked up and this is what she quoted. This is what she found, and I saw many people sharing this on social media once I looked for it. In the Hebrew language, letters are symbols and YHWH is how the Jews spell the proper name of God, Yahweh. The symbol in the Hebrew language for an H is the word behold. The symbol for the Y is a hand. The symbol for the W is a nail. The name YHWH, Yahweh, therefore means, behold the nails in my hands. I've never heard this meaning before, my friend told me. Do you define the word by the individual meaning of the letters? If so, how does this meaning square with Exodus 3:14? That's where God says, I am who I am. She said, thanks. I responded, I love these questions. Anytime I encounter claims about secret meaning in the Hebrew or Greek, especially those employing some kind of apparently consistent linguistic method, I like to see where that method takes me. If it takes me to consistent insight, and insight that persuades other judicious interpreters, then it probably reflects something about how God made language or how he inspired the Bible. If it takes me to greater and greater absurdities, perhaps I can at least get a YouTube video out of it. I wonder what's going to happen this time. So let's try this method. Under the rules as stated, the meaning of YHWH Yahweh would actually be hand behold, nail behold. Where did that source get the my and the? I don't know. But then the true meaning of other words that contain these letters would also be some mixture of hand, behold, and nail. For instance, by this method, the very common word wayahi, which actually gets translated and it came to pass, and it's sort of two words, or sometimes just when is how it's translated, and sometimes it's not translated at all. It's kind of like punctuation. That would mean nail, hand, behold, hand. And those three letters aren't the only ones in the Hebrew alphabet. The method can be extended, presumably. The internet tells me what the other Hebrew letters mean, so now we can know the secret meaning of all the words in the Hebrew Bible. By this method, another major title for God, Adonai, usually translated Lord or Master, has the secret meaning ox door serpent hand, or perhaps, because possible alternate meanings are given for each letter at Wikipedia anyway, cow head fish hand. And if you think about it long enough, you can probably come up with some way for that to picture Jesus. If it's ox door serpent hand, you can imagine an ox trying to enter the door to the sheepfold of the kingdom, but the hand of the serpent stops him. Or if it's cowhead fish hand, you can think of a barley loaf in the shape of a cowhead and two small fishes in the hands of the little boy who shared his meal, enabling Jesus' miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. The longest Hebrew words are the best. You can get the most meaning out of them. So the name Hatzalel Ponai, a descendant of Judah in 1 Chronicles 4:3 in those genealogies, really meant something like, there's a papyrus plant in the window, goad yourself with the fish hook in your hand. This too has some deep theological meaning. The papyrus, of course, was the main kind of paper that was used for making early copies of the Greek New Testament. So I think the name Hatzalel Ponai was probably a promise that the New Testament would soon be seen. It was in the window, as it were, like the papyrus in the window. And if the ancient Israelites would just have goaded themselves to study to the point of sharp physical pain like a fishhook in their hands, they'd have seen that papyrus. They'd have known that the Messiah, which really means water, sun, hand wall, was coming. But there's something even better than long words. This method works equally well with whole verses. And why not if we can do it with words? Under this method, and if the original poster, whoever made this up, gets to add connector words like my and the, then so do I. Genesis 1:1 really means, and I'll read it in a Bible-y accent, the house's head ox had a tooth in his arm, marked with the house head ox, in fact. And an ox goad in the window had a hand on the water ox. But mark well, the window tooth also had a water arm, a water hook, and an ox mark window. Ox heads are papyrus plants. I think we're discovering greater and greater absurdities. There's also a significant complication here called matres lectionis, consonants that are used to indicate the presence of particular vowels, but were likely not present when Moses actually sat down to put pen to parchment, using, we presume, a Paleo-Hebrew script. In other words, the exact original spelling of some Hebrew words was probably a bit different than what we see in the Hebrew Bible today. I'll confess now the weakest point of my answer. I don't know for certain where the conventional associations named in that meme actually come from. One letter means behold, another means nail, another means hand. I assume they have a partial basis in fact, because indeed it's widely accepted that Hebrew, and Greek for that matter, those alphabets have their ultimate source in pictograms or ideograms. But I'll also bet that we've got precisely zero indication that the authors of the Hebrew Bible had any of those conventional associations in mind, any more than we think about the palm of the hand when we write out the letter K. Indeed, why shouldn't this method work in English? I'll tell you why. If my wife wrote me a Post-it note, stuck it on the fridge with some text saying, "Please take out the trash," and if I spent 15 minutes figuring out the secret meaning supposedly invested in every one of the letters in that note, instead of taking out the trash, my wife would be mad. That's why. I think God is not pleased by the Herculean efforts some people go to looking so hard for hidden meanings, whether linguistic or allegorical or what have you, that they miss the simple point of what he actually said. Bible interpretation is hard enough without layering on top of it all kind of silliness. Your reference, I said to my friend, to Exodus 3:14 is very much on point. God had a chance to tell us the meaning of his name, and that's the closest he chose to come. You, in fact, I said to my friend, have come up with an excellent example of doing just what I always recommend. If someone makes an interpretive argument based on the alleged meaning of a Hebrew or Greek word, an interpretive argument that you, by definition, can't verify from your English translation, look instead to sentences and paragraphs and narratives that you can actually read in English. If there are layers of meaning in the Hebrew that aren't available in English, the way to find them is usually to check multiple English Bible translations. But if you do that with Exodus 3:14, you'll find that the translations are pretty united. God chose to give an ambiguous, veiled, layered answer. Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" That's Exodus 3:13-14. I'm not saying knowledge of Hebrew is irrelevant to the study of this puzzling statement from God, but it's a help mainly at the technical level. I do expect people to be able to get a sound interpretation out of this verse, even through translation alone. The themes of authority and divine aseity, the idea that God exists by himself and to himself without any dependence on others. Those ideas that most interpreters see in the Hebrew are just as visible in English. Honestly, I don't think Moses understood God at the burning bush with any more clarity than we do now, especially given the subsequent history of Abraham's seed that we know and Moses did not to mention our centuries of reflection on the famous and glorious passage that we know as Exodus chapter 3. My advice, keep reading and reflecting on the English. And if the Hebrew really has something to say that you can't see in English on those rare occasions, it'll probably be in the notes in a good study Bible. Yahweh, YHWH, doesn't have a secret meaning that you have to know Hebrew to know. God does not speak in secret code.